are alive across Birmingham, the Black Country, Coventry and Warwickshire as well. Now, earlier this week, hundreds of Sikhs gathered together to protest outside the Indian Consulate General offices in Birmingham. The protest was to show solidarity with Bapu Surat Singh Khalsa, who is on hunger strike, and apparently it is 122nd day of a hunger strike. Let's now try and get some background to Bapu Surat Singh Khalsa. And let's have a word with Jasveer Singh, who's the advisor to the Sikh Federation. Welcome to the programme, Jasveer.
Hi, it's just Jazz.
Hi, Jazz. Also, we've got Manjit Kang as well, who's on the line. Hello, Manjit.
Hi, Asha.
Hi, good to speak with you again, Manjit. And you have in the past been on hunger strike before about another incident, haven't you?
I have, yes. Earlier in the year, it was actually on Christmas Day, I held a 35-hour hunger strike to show solidarity for another Sikh man who was on hunger strike by Gurbakhsh Singh. Now, once again, we find ourselves in the same situation, this time an 83-year-old man who's been on hunger strike for 122 days, which I find totally astonishing that, you know, as a community, as human beings, we can allow someone to go that far on hunger without any media coverage, any government intervention. It's absolutely crazy.
Let's now speak to Jazz. Jazz, put this into context for us, Jazz. Who is Bapu Surat Singh Khalsa?
Yeah, and Bapu Surat Singh is a Sikh activist who has lived through probably the worst period in Punjab over the last 30 years. He was there during the Harmandir Sahib attack on Darbar Sahib in 1984. He was part of the resistance movement and political activists in the years that followed, and has sort of lived through all of the dark days in Punjab and through the extrajudicial killings and the torture and the disappearances. So has seen it firsthand. Seen a lot of his colleagues and a lot of younger generation being picked up by the police, being incarcerated under false charges, fabricated cases, and serving up to 25, 30 years, some of them. And I think, so he's one individual who's a resident of the United States, and has actually gone back to India in support of those political prisoners. And the issue of political prisoners has come out many times recently, and a lot of activity has gone on. In fact, that, and when we talk about Sikh political prisoners, what we're really saying is those that are in prison and been incarcerated for longer than their standard minimum term. And there is a number of Sikhs that were given terms that they've now gone beyond or have applied for premature release, and those applications have not been considered. And it's really inhumane to keep individuals away from their families for this longer period and to retain them. It's just criminal. And I think Gurbakhsh Singh, who Manjit mentioned earlier, took it upon him to have a hunger strike on two separate occasions, exactly a year after each other. But unfortunately, due to whether it's false promises or what, those hunger strikes ended around the 66th day earlier last year. I think Bapuji has sort of took it upon himself to do two things. One, to highlight the issue of political prisoners again, that really, what are we left with? When political routes fail, when the legal routes let you down, and nobody wants to go down to the dark days of resistance to these things, but what are you left with? What we're left with is an 85-year-old man having to put his life on the line.
But is he getting listened to, though, Jazz? This is the problem, isn't it? Because you're hearing, little reports maybe in the Asian media and other times not. Is the fact that he's on hunger strike, is it really making any difference?
I think this is a question we've got to ask ourselves, because he is not sitting there for media attention. He's sitting there for the cause. And he's willing and has made peace with himself and is willing to sacrifice himself for the power of the commitment that a Gursikh is making in front of God. I think the responsibility comes on us as individuals. On this humanitarian issue, this isn't a political issue, it's humanitarian grounds. What are we doing? How are we raising awareness to this? And then you question the governments of the day, the British government, others in terms of the EU, the UN, humanitarian organizations. Why are they so quiet? And you have to ask yourself, why are they? Is it due to nobody wants to raise a question against India as a big powerhouse? And this is the thing, are we selling ourselves out as democracy? Are we selling our democracy for trade or for not to upset big, powerful countries? And this is what we've got to look at. What are the influences that are stopping these organizations whose business it is to campaign for individuals like this to remain quiet?
It's a really interesting point that you've raised there, Jazz. I mean, as an advisor to the Sikh Federation, what are you doing as a federation in order to get this talked about?
So, first of all, I mean, we've been campaigning for this for decades on prisoners. Professor Buller was a big case by Rajwana and others in particular. I think the Federation given a political angle to the Federation. We've lobbied and held protests with politicians. The protest on Friday was organised by the Federation Sikh organisation, which the Federation are a key part of, and it's a collective of other Sikh organisations. But we've also written to the US Embassy, given that he's a US resident, and his children are US citizens. We actually wrote to the US Embassy requesting an urgent meeting because this issue does span different geographies, and we did want to discuss them. The last thing we want is Bapu Singh to pass away, and then suddenly there's an outcry of emotion and activity. I think these things need to happen in the meantime. So that's what the Federation are working on.
Absolutely remarkable to hear this, Manjit. As somebody living here in the UK in support of this gentleman, why should Sikhs here, why do they care so much in the sense of, having these protests? We're constantly hearing more and more about hunger strikes, but why does this happen? Why are we having more and more people showing solidarity in this way?
I think that's a great question you raise, Asha, and I think it's not just down to a Sikh issue, it's more a humanitarian issue. It's about, let me just try and put this into a little bit of context. Recently, there was a story of a big Bollywood star who was sentenced for a hit-and-run case. It took him 13 years to reach that sentence, and within a day he's bailed and he's back out making films again.
And we're talking about Salman Khan?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't want to mention his name, but as you have. But in the same, just because these political prisoners haven't got the political power or the money power, they're the system back in India is allowing them to continue being prisoned, and that's inhumane. And that's why I think anyone who's listening to your show will hopefully understand that, and that's what the cry is about. That's what the protests are about. So.
Sure. And what will be happening next, do you think? What would you like to see happen next?
I think, I would like to just see a fair system for everyone. So where prisoners have served their sentences, let them free. Let them go and live their lives. It's their human right. Okay, whatever crime they've committed, they've served that sentence, and they should be allowed to go and live their lives now. So I'd like to see that those prisoners be set free, and Bapu Singh's life is saved.
Sure. And Jazz, what would you like to see happen next?
I think it's a vital point that the world recognises what stand Bapu Singh is making. I mean, it's remarkably brave and admirable. He, an 85-year-old man, is taking upon himself to put his life on the line. And that should be a wake-up call to many of us, that this is what it takes. It's a sorry state of affairs that one man putting his life on the line to raise a humanitarian cause is what we're seeing. But I think going forward, we have to look at the treatment of minorities in India. We are not living in the 80s anymore. This isn't 1984, 85, 95 even. So to still incarcerate individuals who were implicated or charged or sort of arrested during those dark periods, to continue to hold them now is a blotch on India. And India needs to show that if it is a democracy, it can actually have a fair system. And if you look at the many examples, Salman Khan is one of them. These guys never see the insides of a prison. There are many similar cases in the Delhi genocide that individuals roam free, even when they are convicted. But when it comes to Sikhs and other minorities, the law is completely different. And no one's asking for special treatment. They're just looking for equality and fairness out of the system, and let these individuals go back to their families and live their lives.
Sure. Jazz Singh, advisor to the Sikh Federation, and Manjit Kang as well. Thank you both for coming on and sharing your views. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Take care. There we go. It's definitely a story that we'll be following on Midlands Masala as well, by the way. So if you've got any opinions whatsoever, you can call me 03453 009956, or of course you can